Thank you, Emma, for all the work that you do as a child care provider. I'm also a single mom, and both of my children, they started off in a home daycare. Both my son, who's going to be 20 years old, I can't believe it, next month, and my daughter, who's 12 years old. So first, I want to thank you for all that you do and the service that you provide to many parents, particularly a single parent who rely on affordable child care so that we can work. For me, it was working and going to school and also being a city councilwoman. So the three questions touch upon access to benefits and education, as well as public safety. As healthcare, as a provider of education and childcare, it's important that we create avenues for you to have access to healthcare. Everyone should have access to healthcare, and that should be like a basic necessity. And as mayor, I would certainly work with the state to ensure that everyone in our city has access to basic care, because that is critical. And during these past few years, we've seen the importance of having access to health care through our neighborhood health centers, through a private provider. But that's something that should be part of everyone's basic amenities that they have, because that's part of your that helps you thrive. And it's one of the benefits that we all should have access to. In terms of education, so I am a graduate of Providence Public Schools. My children are Providence Public School kids as well. In fact, my sister's foster children was going to Kazarian, and I would drop them off, and I've been in the buildings. We have not done a good job in providing our kids with a quality education since I was in school, and our buildings are falling apart. In fact, when I went inside this building, I took photos, reached out to the superintendent to tell them how shocked I was by the condition and also the trash that I found in there when picking up the kids from their after-school program. So if we're sending our kids to these after-school programs that are investing high-quality after-school programs, the space that they're learning in should be of quality. That's why I worked on the First Fix Our School campaign to ensure that we pass the bond so that we can fix our school buildings. In terms of small businesses, part of my plan is having within economic development, having a small business liaison. Now, a lot of our communities have neighborhood associations, and we should actually be working with our neighborhood associations because they've already started doing the work. I know in my ward, particularly the Mount Hope Neighborhood Association, they're doing a lot of work in sharing information with the community, holding classes for people who might be interested in various things, from starting a small business. They've had workshops around housing, home ownership, etc. So we don't have to necessarily recreate the wheel because a lot of this stuff is happening. However, it's not necessarily supported. And, you know, there are a lot of barriers for people to do business in Providence. And when you're a small business, it's even more challenging because you don't have the infrastructure. So having that small business liaison working with our neighborhood association, the goal is to cut out some of these barriers and just to make information, tools, grants, and other opportunities more accessible to people in the community.
Yeah.
And the other question was around public safety. Healthy communities are safer communities. So we can't talk about safe communities without also talking about healthy communities. And healthy communities are also communities that provide our kids with quality education, where people have access to high quality before and after school care, where there are investments in our neighborhoods for our youth, youth employment opportunities, as well as summer jobs. So as mayor, I am committed to implementing a community policing model. And a community policing model, it's also thinking about taking a proactive approach. Police officers who truly represent the community, walking the beats, engaging with community members, but also making the investments to prevent the crimes from happening, creating pathways for our young people. That's why as a city council person, I was a strong advocate for youth and summer jobs, and also to expand the program so that we have it year round. And as mayor, one of the things that I would like to do is to create an apprenticeship program where we're connecting our young people to some of our local businesses, to our art industry. We also have a booming food industry right here in Providence, so that students could go to school to learn about urban farming, starting their own restaurant. And this is the work that I also do in higher education, which I hope to do as mayor. And finally, one of the things that I worked on is create a framework and for us to launch an initiative, a crisis response behavioral crisis response initiative in the city of Providence, excuse me. And one of the challenges too is that people are experiencing many different types of challenges and crisis. And if you're experiencing homelessness, if you're experiencing mental or behavioral health, one should not be criminalized for that. So part of the program is to send out trained workers to intervene, de-escalate the situation, but most importantly, connect folks to services so that they can get the continued care that they need. And that also is part of public safety as well as healthy communities. And finally, affordability, the housing crisis. I was just talking earlier this week with a friend, and this is something I've shared, is even in my own neighborhood, I wouldn't be able to afford to purchase a home on my own block. And I live on a pretty modest block. And I've talked to people throughout the city of Providence, my own parents. My dad is 74 years old. And in fact, going back to the point about being in the neighborhood, the red building where Sojourner House is located, for extra money, my dad used to clean that building. And I used to be with him cleaning so that he can give me some a few dollars so we can go across the street to the thrift store so I could pick out a toy or a book. So most people in our city struggle just to make ends meet, and they have to work more than one job. So as mayor, I'm committed to, one, building more affordable housing. We received a significant amount of funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. I hope to work with the state to maximize those dollars. I actually passed legislation to create the task force so that the community can get engaged and decide how those funds can be allocated. And one of the priorities was housing. Also looking at zoning policies that have historically prevented development of more affordable housing, and ensuring that housing is for people who are unhoused with no income, low income, moderate income, and also our aging population.